What is the greatest loss in the world? Is it the loss of money, youth? Is it the loss of a loved one? Or the broken heart of one who has been betrayed and lost the love of their life? It's hard to compare these different forms of loss, but one who has felt loss knows how much it hurts. For some, it may last a short while. For others, it can take many years or even a lifetime. Loss comes from attachment, the feeling that this is mine, my house, my car, my possessions, my dog, my cat, my child, my parent, my friend, my lover. The feeling of belonging is a vital part of our human existence. It gives us the greatest joy and the deepest pain. Spiritual gurus, saints, and monks advocate giving up attachment as well as the desire to have, to own, to claim something or someone as mine. They want to help us so we do not suffer, but this feels impossible. For us, desire, attachment, and belonging feel like our very breath. Life would have no meaning without them, just as life would have no meaning without happiness or love or peace or purpose. Why do we want what we want? Why are we the way we are? Why do we all want the same things, regardless of nationality, religion, race, or ethnicity? As I see it, we're all spiritual at the core, souls having a human existence or experience. Our soul is by nature loving, peaceful, joyful, and has a relationship with the divine or God. And that is the ultimate attachment, the ultimate sense of belonging, the greatest desire. Because we're not conscious of our soul or its needs, we hear its promptings through the filter of our mind. We then look all over the world, try all kinds of experiences, and in the end find ourselves disappointed, frustrated, and scared. The wise sages of ancient times left us a powerful message in the Vedas, that what we are seeking goes far beyond the realm of this world. Our soul is speaking to us through our desires, asking us to find our true spiritual self and its source, or God. How amazing would that be, to see God, to know God, to love God, to find the greatest love of all? And then what would happen if you were to be separated from this ultimate love, this ultimate bliss, this ultimate beauty? What would be the nature of that loss? Would it be painful or blissful? Would love grow or die? Let's find out. So today we're going to hear about Akrura, his arrival in the city of Vrindavan. But if you remember from the earlier episodes, if you were there, then you'll remember a few things. And that is that we were talking about how the great sage Narad had gone before the king, Kans. And when Narad went to Kans, he told him the story, the hidden mystery of what had happened. He told him about how the person who was going to kill the king, Kans, had already taken birth. And he'd been removed from that jail cell. And Kans was shocked. He had no idea. He had imprisoned his own sister. So now what he did was he called all his ministers together and he sent out a message. He sent Akrura, one of the relatives of Krishna, he sent him to Vrindavan with a message to bring Krishna to the city of Mathura where the king Kans lived. And his plan was to have Krishna killed. And he had planned for this very powerful elephant to stomp Krishna under his feet. And if that didn't work, for some of his very powerful wrestlers to take these young boys, Krishna and Balaram, and beat them up and kill them. He made all kinds of plans. But he had no idea what he was dealing with. So what happened next is Akrura, the uncle of Krishna, was sent out to go and get Krishna to the city of Mathura. So that's Krishna. He was about 11 years old at the time and looked like a young boy, right? So the uncle got on his chariot, and this uncle was known to be a very noble-minded person, a very good human being. Mahamatihi is the word used in Sanskrit. So he mounted his chariot and he set off for Vrindavan. And as he traveled on the road, this great soul, this Mahabhagaha, he felt tremendous devotion. The word used is Bhaktim Param, the greatest devotion for the Supreme Being, the Supreme Personality of Godhead who had incarnated in Vrindavan. And he began to consider as follows: what pious deeds must I have done? What severe austerities must I have undergone? What worship would I have performed? What charity would I have given that today I get to see Keshava, Krishna, the Supreme Being? This is a little drawing of Akrura. Having this moment of contemplation, I encourage you as well to look and contemplate. You know, we all go through life very mechanically, and we just do our daily stuff, you know, brush our teeth, have a shower, go out, go to work. But very rarely do we contemplate. What is there to contemplate? You say. Well, you know, there's so much. Contemplate, what is it that causes the sun to rise? What causes my limbs to move? What causes my heart to beat? How come I'm so fortunate that I'm alive? How come I'm so blessed that I have this day in which I have unlimited possibilities of what I can do? I have only a few days in this life. It could be a few hundred, a few thousand, but that's about it. And I have this one day, this one moment, and I can do anything I want. What is it I would want to do? But before I go out to do something, I must contemplate, who am I? How did I get here? What is the point of this life? What's behind this creation? What's behind all of this? Many people have called this a matrix, a kind of virtual reality. What's behind the virtual reality? Is there a reality beyond this virtual world, beyond this illusion? And if so, what is that? These are questions to contemplate, even as you're driving to work, even as you're walking somewhere. And that's what Akrura was doing. He was contemplating, what great fortune I have that I get to see God today, that Supreme Being, that ultimate. Will I possibly have this moment where I've dreamt of this, I've thought of this, I've contemplated this, and now it's happening? But he also realizes at the same time that he says, I'm a materialistic person. I'm absorbed in sense gratification. I think it is durlabham, difficult for me to have gotten this opportunity to see Lord Uttama Shloka, that Supreme Being who is glorified by the greatest of verses, the greatest of poems, the greatest of writings. Then he says, enough of such thoughts. After all, even a fallen soul like me can have the chance to behold the infallible Supreme Lord, Achyuta. Achyuta means infallible. Why is that word significant? Because we are fallible. We make mistakes. We do stupid things. But that Supreme Being who is the cause of everything, who is the source of everything, that Supreme Being is Achyuta, infallible. In fact, our very soul is also made of that same substance and therefore is in a way infallible too. But that soul being locked in this human form now is stuck with the mind, is stuck with the intelligence, is stuck with the body. And this body-mind organism doesn't necessarily know what the soul wants, isn't fully aware of who we are and why we're here. So anyway, he's contemplating his good fortune. And he says, well, conditioned souls being swept along by the river of time may sometimes reach the shore. And it seems to him that in this moment, he has come to the shore. His prayers have been answered. Today, all my sinful reactions have been eradicated. Nashtam. And my birth has become worthwhile. Since I will offer my respects, my namaste to the Supreme Lord, Bhagavata, the Supreme Being, Bhagavan, at his lotus feet. And that's what yogis, great mystics, meditate upon. They meditate upon him within the heart. And they hope one day to be able to see him face to face, as I will today. I want you to really contemplate this possibility. God is not just some old man sitting in the clouds, but is someone you can meet face to face, just like Krura is about to do. He then thinks, indeed today King Kans has shown me great mercy by sending me to see the lotus feet of Krishna, who is also known as Hari. Who has now appeared in this world. Simply by the effulgence of his toenails, many souls in the past have transcended the insurmountable darkness of material existence, and they've achieved liberation. So what is this liberation? After all, whether you are a follower of any religion, if you were a Christian, they would talk of salvation. If you were a Buddhist, you would talk about liberation, moksha, nirvana. Whether if you were a follower of Advaita, you'd also talk about the same, liberation. And here, the greatest form of liberation when it comes to love of God is to be able to see God face to face, to have darshan, to be able to behold the beauty, the majesty, the incredible wonder of that form of God. And he is about to have that great blessing. He says those lotus feet are worshipped, the lotus feet of God are worshipped by Brahma, Shiva, and all the other demigods, by Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, and by the great sages and Vaishnavas, the devotees. Upon those lotus feet, the Supreme Being walks about in the forests of Vrindavan while herding the cows with his companions, and those feet are smeared with the kumkum from the gopis' breasts. We've been talking about the loving affairs of Krishna and all his beloved friends and lovers in the town of Vrindavan. This was all happening 3000 BC, 5,000 years ago. And it's important for us to remember this, because in remembering this, we remember what is possible for us. We too can be part of this Leela, these pastimes, these wonderful loving affairs with God. Because behind everything we seek in this world is that connection. We all seek love. You have to ask yourself why. We all seek happiness. Ask yourself why. Because there's a remembering in your soul which is telling you about who you are, which is telling you about your relationship with the divine, with God. So don't take it lightly. Know that this is the reality. Then Akrura says, surely I shall see the face of Krishna, and since the deer are now walking past me on my right, that face framed by his curly hair is beautified by his attractive cheeks and nose, his smiling glances and his reddish lotus eyes. There's a vision of Krishna with the deer and the peacock. So Akrura is preparing himself for this moment. He says, I'm going to see that Supreme Godhead Vishnu today, the reservoir of all beauty, who by his own sweet will has now assumed a human-like form to relieve the burden of the earth. Krishna says, I appear millennium after millennium to annihilate the miscreants, troublemakers, the demonic creatures, beings who come here and create havoc on earth, and to engage in loving relationships with my beloved devotees. So he comes by his own sweet will, and he has assumed a human-like form to relieve the earth of her burden. Thus there is no denying that my eyes will achieve the perfection of their existence. He is the witness of material cause and effect, yet he is always free from false identification with them. By his internal potency, he dispels the darkness of separation and confusion. All sins are destroyed and all good fortune is created by the Supreme Lord's qualities, activities, and appearances. And words that describe these three things animate, beautify, and purify the world. What are those three things? His qualities, his activities, and his appearances. He says, the words that describe these three things animate, beautify, and purify the world. On the other hand, words bereft of his glories are like the decorations on a corpse. The same thing is actually said in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tattvataha tyaktva deham punarjanma naeti mameti so Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. So yes, there is one kind of liberation or moksha which is about merging into the divine, merging into the light. But I ask you, what happens then? Oh no, I'll just be in bliss. Okay, but what happens then? In that bliss, what's going to happen? You're just going to be in bliss. Okay, you're blissed out. It's like being high. It's like being on some drug. But don't you ever want to come back and live a life that is joyful and experience all the wonderful things that life has to offer? Krishna is saying, one who knows the transcendental nature, not mundane nature, not material nature, the transcendental nature, the spiritual nature of my appearance and activities. That's why we read these activities, so that we may connect with that transcendental nature. Does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode. That's what he says in Bhagavad Gita. And Akrura is saying the same thing here in the Bhagavatam. That one who knows the Supreme Lord's qualities, activities, and appearances, those words that describe these animate, beautify, and purify the world. And all other words and all other sounds that are bereft of his glories are like the decorations on a corpse. Today I shall certainly see him, and the goal and spiritual master of the great souls. Seeing him brings jubilation to all who have eyes, for he is the true beauty of the universe. Indeed, his personal form is the shelter desired by all the great sages and even the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi. Now all the dawns of my life have become auspicious. So there's a beautiful prayer by Brahma. This is a picture of Brahma as he has a vision of Krishna, as he sees for himself who is that supreme being, who is that supreme Godhead. And he says then, Lakshmi sahasra satasam brahmasevyamanam govindam adi purusham. Govinda, Krishna, the Adi Purush, the original being. Tam aham bhajami, I worship you. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. Then he says, Ananda chinmaya sad ujjvala vigrahasya Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. Prime means the original being, whose transcendental form, his form is full of bliss, truth, and substantiality, Sat Chit Ananda, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possess in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs. In other words, he can see, with his hands or hear with his eyes. It doesn't matter. All parts of his body are spiritual and all can perform the functions of each other. And he eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universe as both spiritual and mundane. By the way, those of you that are here, please know that I will be answering all questions at the end. So please write down your questions at the end of the reading and this discussion, my explanation of it. I will gladly take up your questions. In fact, I look forward to them. So please feel free to write, type it in the chat area wherever you are. If you're on Instagram or you're on YouTube or Facebook, please write down your questions. I will be greatly indebted. I really appreciate questions. I love it. Then Akrura says, then I will, so now he's imagining the whole scene. What will happen? Like, I'd love for you to do that. Think about it. If you were to come face to face with the most beautiful being of all, the most powerful, the most famous, the most strong, the most wise, right? That's the definition of God. One who possesses all knowledge, all beauty, all fame, all strength, who's known by everyone, right? And who owns everything. If you were to have that moment where you could be in the presence of the divine, of God, what would you do? How would you respond? Akrura says, I will at once get down from my chariot and bow down at his lotus feet, at the lotus feet of Krishna and Balaram, the supreme personalities of God. That's Krishna and his brother. Theirs are the same feet that the great mystic yogis, striving for self-realization, bear within their minds. They meditate on those feet. I will also offer my respects to their friends, their cowherd boyfriends, and to all the other residents of Vrindavan. And when I have fallen at his feet, the Almighty Lord will place his lotus hand upon my head. For those who seek shelter in him, because they are greatly disturbed by the powerful serpent of time, that hand removes all fear. Think about it. What is the thing we want to avoid at all costs throughout our life? There is one thing we want to avoid. All of us want to avoid at all costs. And that is fear. It is because of fear that we have a house, we have a car, we have insurance policies, we have a family, we have savings. We do everything we can so that we may be safe. Now imagine that someone would just touch you on your head, and that touch would remove all fear. You would become fearless. How is that possible? Is this some kind of wishy, mumbo jumbo? No. Please understand. Fear comes because we have a human body, and this body is perishable, and we know that. It has a certain amount of time. At any moment, something can happen, and this body can be wiped out. We can lose everything we have at that moment. Maybe we get old and we get dementia. Maybe we get in an accident. Maybe some crazy person comes along with a gun and we happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. You never know, right? You're out shopping in the grocery store, in the mall. You never know. There's a lot of crazies out there these days. But that's not the point. The idea is not to put fear into you. The idea is to say, okay, what does it take to become fearless? And here the answer is being given. Fearlessness comes when you recognize that you're not just a human being, you're also a spiritual being. In fact, that's your true, real identity. And that identity of spirit, that I am a spiritual being that existed before I came into this body and will exist after I leave this body. That awareness, never was there a time when I did not exist, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you. And never will there be a time when we shall cease to be. And the moment you get this very simple idea, why? Is this again some belief system, some religion? No. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. He was saying that 5,000 years ago. And the rishis and the sages knew it well before that even. So the answer is here. And he says, when you come in touch with spirit, immediately your fear is gone. There is no fear anymore. The very thing that has us running on a treadmill all our life is gone. And then he's thinking, during the pleasure pastimes of the Rasa Leela, the Rasa dance, and again, I won't go into that now, we've discussed that in earlier episodes, when Krishna wiped away the gopis' perspiration. Gopis are the cowherd girls, and they would dance at night. So the Supreme Being is not some dull, boring guy sitting up there in heaven on the clouds. He's dancing, he's singing, he's playing the flute, he's charming, delightful. So when they had the Rasa Leela dance, Krishna wiped away the gopis, the cowherd girls, their perspiration, and removed their fatigue. The touch of their faces made that hand as fragrant as a sweet flower. The infallible Lord will not consider me an enemy, even though Kans has sent me here as his messenger. Kans refers to the king who's actually sent Akrura to bring Krishna to Mathura so that the king may kill Krishna. But he's saying, even despite that, Krishna knows my heart. He is omniscient, and with his perfect vision, he witnesses both externally and internally all the endeavors of the conditioned soul's heart. Thus, he will cast his smiling, affectionate glance upon me as I remain fixed with joined palms, fallen in obeisances at his feet. Then all my contamination will at once be dispelled, and I will give up all doubts and feel the most intense bliss. See, why do we seek all this? Why are we interested in all this? For what reason? One reason. Not just, I told you about fear, but there is another deeper, bigger reason. And that is, we all want happiness. But the happiness of this world is fleeting. You buy a new car, you're happy for a few days. You get a house, you have a new partner. You might feel happy for a little while. Then the problems set in. Or then it becomes normal, it becomes mundane, it becomes ordinary. And now you no longer have that same specialness that you had earlier, right? So, what we seek is ultimately happiness, is bliss. And that bliss, that intense bliss, anandamayo bhyasa, that's what spiritual life is about. That intense bliss, he's saying, when he picks me up, I will feel that intense bliss. Recognizing me as an intimate friend and relative, Krishna will embrace me with his mighty arms, instantly sanctifying my body and releasing me from karma and material bondage. Having been embraced by the all-famous Sri Krishna, I will humbly stand before him with bowed head and joined palms, and he will address me. My dear Akrura, at that very moment, my life's purpose will be fulfilled. Indeed, the life of anyone whom the Supreme Personality fails to recognize is simply pitiable. The Supreme Lord has no favorite and no dearmost friend, nor does he consider anyone undesirable, despicable, or fit to be neglected. All the same, he lovingly reciprocates with his devotees in whatever manner they worship him, just as the trees heavenly planets fulfill the desires of whoever approaches them. And then Krishna's elder brother Balaram will grasp my folded hands while I am still standing with my head bowed, and after embracing me, he will take me to his house. There he will honor me with all items of ritual welcome and inquire from me about how King Kans has been treating his family members. While traveling on the road, thus meditating deeply on Sri Krishna, Akrura reached Gokul as the sun was beginning to set. Now for Akrura, this is a great moment. For Akrura, this is such a beautiful moment. But for the people of Vrindavan, this is the beginning of hell. Their loved one, Krishna, is going to be taken away. And they can't live for a second without him. Not 1 second. Even the blinking of the eyes felt like too much. When you had the most beautiful being in front of you, the most delightful, the supreme being of all, who has come to you as a little boy, as a little child, and you've given your heart to him. Now if someone comes to take him away, what would that be like? Akrura continues, in the cowherd pasture, Akrura saw the footprints of those feet whose pure dust the rulers of all the planets in the universe hold to their crowns. Those footprints of the Supreme Being, distinguished by such marks such as the lotus, barley corn, and elephant goad, made the ground wonderfully beautiful. So that's Akrura, bowing down and seeing those footprints. And these are the footprints with all their different symbols. Increasingly agitated by ecstasy at seeing Krishna's footprints, his bodily hairs, the hairs on Akrura's body, stood on end because of his pure love, and his eyes filled with tears. Akrura jumped down from his chariot, began rolling about among those footprints, exclaiming, "Ah, this is the dust from my master's feet." The very goal of life for all embodied beings is this ecstasy, which Akrura experienced when, upon receiving Kansa's order, he put aside all his pride, all his fear, all his lamentation, and absorbed himself in seeing, hearing, and describing the things that reminded him of Sri Krishna. That's the same thing that's available for all of us. All of us, when we hear about these things, when we understand the possibility, when we know that this is what is possible for us too. Akrura sees himself as an ordinary being. He knows that, he's not some great person, but at the same time, he's blessed in this moment. Akrura then saw Krishna and Balaram. He saw Krishna and his brother Balaram going to milk the cows. Krishna wore yellow garments, Balaram blue, and their eyes resembled autumnal lotuses. One of those two mighty armed youths, the shelter of the goddess of fortune Lakshmi, had a dark blue complexion, and the other's face was white. With their fine-featured faces, they were the most beautiful of all persons. And as they walked with the gait of young elephants, glancing about with compassionate smiles, these two exalted personalities beautified the cow pasture. So now they were in a little village, and they would taking care of cows. This is while Krishna, in his first few years of his life. Later on, he went on to Dwarka and became a king. But this is the early life. As they walked with the gait of young elephants, glancing about with compassionate smiles, those two exalted personalities beautified the cow pasture with the impressions of their feet. So now he's saying two personalities. Yes, because that's Krishna and his brother, and they are none different. And just as Radha and Krishna, Radha is the feminine form of Krishna, so also Balaram, as his brother, is no different than Krishna. They're all the same being in different forms. These two beings, whose pastimes are most magnanimous and attractive, were ornamented with jeweled necklaces and flower garlands, anointed with auspicious fragrant substances, freshly bathed and dressed in spotless garments. They were the primeval supreme personalities, the masters of the universe, the original cause of the universe, who had, for the welfare of the earth, descended in their original forms as Krishna and Balaram. They resembled two gold-bedecked mountains, one of emerald and the other of silver, and with their effulgence they dispelled the sky's darkness in all directions. Akrura, overwhelmed with affection, quickly jumped down from his chariot and fell at the feet of Krishna and Balaram like a rod. So when they talk about falling down like a rod, they're talking about someone who's offering dandavat. For those of you that are on Instagram, that would look more like this. The joy of seeing the Supreme Lord flooded Akrura's eyes with tears and decorated his limbs with eruptions of ecstasy. He felt such eagerness that he could not speak. Recognizing Akrura, Krishna drew him close with his hand and then embraced him. So just as Akrura had imagined, Krishna felt pleased, for he is always benignly disposed towards his surrendered devotees. As Akrura stood with his head bowed and palms folded, Balaram, Krishna's brother, grasped his hands and took him to his house along with Krishna. So they went inside now. After inquiring from Akrura whether his trip had been comfortable, Balaram offered him a seat and bathed his feet. Now notice, the Supreme Being has taken one of his devotees, sat him on a most comfortable seat, and is washing his feet in accordance with the injunction of Scripture, and respectfully then serving him milk with honey. That almighty Balaram presented Akrura with the gift of a cow, massaged his feet to relieve him of fatigue, and then with great respect and faith fed him suitably prepared food of various fine tastes. This is etiquette, and the Supreme Being on this earth, follows that etiquette, follows that dharma, that way of living. When Akrura had eaten to his satisfaction, Balaram, the supreme knower of dharma, Parama Dharmavit, one who knows dharma, supremely knows it, because he is the source of all dharma. He is the one who teaches us dharma, shows us how to live in this world. He offered Akrura aromatic herbs for sweetening his mouth, along with fragrances and flower garlands. Akrura thus enjoyed the highest pleasure. Now at this point, Krishna's father, King Nanda, got into the scene. He says to Akrura, King Nanda says to Akrura, how are you and your family maintaining yourselves while that merciless King Kans remains alive? You are just like sheep under the care of a butcher. That cruel, self-serving Kans murdered the infants of his own sister in her presence, even as she cried in anguish. So why should we even ask about the well-being of you and his subjects? Yeah, I'll tell you about this in just a minute. How Krishna's birth mother had been tormented. Firstly, they'd been put in jail. So this is that scene where Krishna's birth mother and father, when the king got to know that their child was going to kill him, he'd taken them and put them in jail. 6 of their children were killed in front of their eyes as soon as they were born. The 7th was supposedly a miscarriage, but actually it was Balaram being transferred to the womb of Rohini. The 8th was Krishna, little baby Krishna. But he didn't just come as a baby. He also came because his parents were so scared that the king was going to kill him. So he came also as Vishnu, and he showed them his form as the Supreme Being. And he said, I have now come to you as your child. Do not worry. Take me out of this jail, and I will take care of everything. At that point, the guards all fell asleep. The doors of the jail opened, and the father of Krishna, Vasudeva, was able to take Krishna out of the jail and brought him over to across the river to a different town called Gokul, where his friend had also had a baby. And they switched the baby. It's a long story. You'll hear, if you go to my playlist, you'll see it at the beginning, the birth of Krishna. You'll find this all on YouTube from the in Spiritual Wisdom Academy. Go there or just type in my name, Rohit Juneja. And you'll find it all there. There's a playlist there called The Life of Krishna, Leela, The Life of Krishna. So go there and look that up, and you'll be able to catch it up from the beginning if you really want it, if you're really interested in all of this. Now, having been honored so much by Balaram and Krishna, Akrura, seated comfortably on a couch, felt that all the desires he had contemplated on the road were now fulfilled. At this point, the sage Shukadev, who is narrating this whole incident, is the most enlightened being of that time, and he's got hundreds of other sages and saintly people sitting in front of him, and he's telling them this whole narrative about the pastimes of the Supreme Being. So he says here, what is unattainable for one who has satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Being? Even so, those who are dedicated to his devotional service, bhakti, never want anything from him. So once again, you bring on the screen that beautiful form of Krishna. After the evening meal, Krishna once again asked Akrura, my dear gentle uncle Akrura, was your trip here comfortable? May all good fortune be yours. Are our well-wishing friends and relatives, both close and distant, are they happy and in good health? As long as King Kans, who is the disease of our family, as long as he lives, he who is supposedly my maternal uncle, how can we be happy? I know it's a redundant question. Just see how much suffering I have caused my offenseless parents. Because of me, their sons were killed and they themselves were imprisoned. See, Kant was a tyrant. He was Hitler times 100. he was a complete and utter tyrant. But when he heard that there was someone born who was going to kill him, he became 10 times the tyrant that he was. He was totally fixed on Krishna. He could only think of Krishna. He wanted somehow to kill him, but he didn't know where he was. Now he knew, and he had sent a Akrura to go get Krishna so he could personally have him killed. Because he'd sent many other people before and they'd been unsuccessful. So Krishna now says, by good fortune, we have today fulfilled our desire to see you, my dear uncle, our dear relative. Please tell us why you have come. Akrura then described the entire situation, including King Kansa's enmity towards Krishna's family and his attempt to murder Krishna's birth father, Vasudeva. Akrura then relayed the message he'd been sent to deliver, which was that for Krishna to come to Mathura and engage in a wrestling match. And also for all the other cowherd people from Krishna's village of Vrindavan, Braj, to also come. So Akrura relayed that message which the king had sent. He also described Kansa's real intentions, which was to kill Krishna, and how Narad, this great sage, had informed Kans that Krishna had been born as the son of Vasudeva. Kans did not know that until now. Krishna and Balaram, the vanquisher of heroic opponents, laughed when they heard Akrura's words. They then informed their father Nanda of the king's orders. Nanda then issued orders for the cowherd men by having the village constable make the following announcement throughout the village of Braj. Go collect all the available milk products, bring valuable gifts and yoke your wagons. Tomorrow we shall go to Mathura, present our milk products to the king, and see a great festival. The residents of all the outlying districts will also be there. Now his father is excited. They're going for a festival. But the ladies in Vrindavan, they have a deep intuition. The young girls, they know. They could not be away from Krishna for even a second. And they are horrified when they hear this. When they heard that Akrura had come to Braja to take Krishna and Balaram to the city, they became extremely distressed. The gopis, the young girls of Vrindavan, felt so pained at heart that their faces turned pale and their breathing became heavy. Others were so anguished that their dresses, bracelets, and braids became loose. Other gopis entirely stopped their sensory activities and became fixed on meditation on Krishna. They sensed that something terrible was about to happen. These men didn't know that. They didn't understand that. And the women, they lost all awareness of the external world, just like those who attained the platform of self-realization. And still other young women fainted simply by remembering his words. Those words decorated with wonderful phrases, Krishna's words. And he would speak to them. Those words, decorated with wonderful phrases and expressed with affectionate smiles, would deeply touch the young girls' hearts. The gopis were frightened at the prospect of even the briefest separation from Krishna. In fact, they would curse the creator Brahma. Why did you give us eyelids? Even that second of blinking was too much for them. When Krishna would go to the forest to take care of the cows with his male friends, they waited anxiously. It was like the soul had left their bodies, and they mechanically went about their household chores. And when he came back from the forest after grazing the cows, it was as if life had come back to them. And then in the evening they would meet at night time, and then they would dance and sing and play. It was the most beautiful romantic experience ever. They had met the love of their life. They had met their soulmate. They had met the greatest love of all. And that's what Krishna is inviting us to. He shows us this Leela, this pastime, just so that we may know that that's the way he'd like to relate with us. Some people in Vrindavan related to him as their friend. And as friends, even though he was the Supreme Lord, the greatest of all, the creator of everything, They would climb on his shoulders. They would steal his lunch. Krishna would take food out of their mouth and put it in his mouth. There was no formality at all. Others related to Krishna as their child, especially Krishna's mother and many of the other women. And Krishna's mom would even run after him with a stick to beat him. I don't know how much she actually beat him, but I don't think she had the heart to do that. But there was enough to threaten him. And she would scare him. And she would tie him up even sometimes when he was being too naughty, because he was extremely naughty as a young boy, as a child. So the gopis were beside themselves, the young girls were beside themselves with anxiety at the thought of the great separation about to come. They gathered in groups and spoke to one another, their faces covered with tears, their minds fully absorbed in him. See, this is ultimate meditation. This is the meditation that the yogis can't find so hard to have. We struggle to focus our mind, to meditate. Ask someone to meditate and see how much your mind wanders. I know mine did. It took something very powerful. It takes something so captivating that now your mind no longer wanders. It's like when you fall in love. It's instant meditation. Now fall in love with that supreme being, the most beautiful of all. Oh, imagine that meditation. So they remembered his graceful gait. So now they started remembering him as they're thinking of the lost. They're starting to remember the way he would walk, his pastimes, his affectionate smiling glances, his heroic deeds, his joking words, which would relieve their distress. The gopis said, "O Providence, you have no mercy. You bring embodied creatures together in friendship and love and then senselessly separate them before they fulfill their desires. This whimsical play of yours is like a child's game." So they're blaming Providence. Having shown us Krishna's face framed by dark locks and beautified by his fine cheeks, his raised nose and gentle smiles which eradicate all misery, you are now making that face invisible. This behavior of yours is not at all good. O Providence, though you come here with the name Akrura, you are indeed cruel. For like a fool, you are now taking away what you once gave us, those eyes with which we have seen that form which is the perfection of all creation. Krishna, who breaks loving friendships in a second, will not even look directly at us. Forcibly brought under his control, we abandoned our homes, relatives, children, and husbands just to serve him. But he is always looking for new lovers. Who are we talking about? Are we talking about some mundane person? Are we talking about some random guy who just, wants new lovers? No, we're talking about the Supreme Being. Everyone is in love with him. And so, yes, he's got others who want to also see him, who want to know him, who want to love him. He's got other things that he's come to this earth to do. The gopis don't care, of course. When you're in love, you don't care, right? But he had come here to annihilate the miscreants. There was so many horrible people on this earth at that time. And they were creating so much of havoc. They were destroying dharma. All kinds of righteousness was being wiped out. It's like having hundreds of Hitlers all over the world. So he had incarnated to be able to annihilate those miscreants, those troublemakers. And that was one of the big purposes of his being here. The other was, of course, to give pleasure to his devotees. But that time was now coming to an end. And so the gopis were terrified. The dawn following this night, they said, will be auspicious for the women of Mathura, for the place where he's going. All their hopes will now be fulfilled. For as the Lord of Braja, of Vrindavan, that's Krishna, enters their city, they will be able to drink from his face the nectar of the smile, emanating from the corners of his eyes. O gopis, although our Krishna is intelligent and very obedient to his parents, once he has fallen under the spell of the honey-sweet words of the women of Mathura and been enchanted by their alluring shy smiles, how will he ever return to us unsophisticated village girls? When the women of Mathura see Krishna, they will certainly enjoy a great festival for their eyes, as will all those who see him traveling along the road to the city. After all, he is the darling of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, and the reservoir of all transcendental qualities. He who is doing this merciless deed should not be called Akrura. Akrura actually means someone who's not cruel, but he is cruel, He is so extremely cruel that without even trying to console us, the sorrowful residents of Vrindavan, of Braj, he is taking away Krishna, who is more dear to us than life itself. Hard-hearted Krishna has already mounted the chariot, and now the foolish cowherd men are hurrying after him in their bullock carts. Even the elders are saying nothing to stop him. Today, fate is working against us. So now what they decide to do is they decide to go and directly stop Krishna. Let us directly approach Krishna and stop him from going. What can our family elders and others, relatives, do to us? Now that fate is separating us from him, our hearts are already wretched, for we cannot bear to give up his association even for the fraction of a second. So let me show you how beautiful this loving relationship is between God and his beloved. This is Krishna and Radha. And then there are the gopis, there are thousands of them. And these were their beautiful pastimes as they would dance in the night. This is the Rasa Leela. Krishna, the one Krishna, had become hundreds of Krishnas. He was with each and every one of them. And each and every one of them thought, he's only with me. I'm so fortunate, he's only with me. But he was with every single one of them, and every single one of them thought, he's only with me. And that was the Rasa Leela. It was so incredibly powerful. It is like nothing else. When he brought us to the assembly of the Rasa dance, where we enjoyed his affectionate and charming smiles, his delightful secret talks, his playful glances, and his embraces, we passed many nights as if they were a single moment. O gopis, how can we possibly cross over the insurmountable darkness of his absence? How can we exist without Krishna, who in the evening would return to Vrindavan in the company of the cowherd boys, his hair and garland powdered with the dust raised by the cow's hooves? As he played his flute, he would captivate our minds with his smiling, sidelong glances. After speaking these words, the ladies of Vrindavan, who were so attached to Krishna, felt extremely agitated by their imminent separation from him. They forgot all shame and loudly cried out, O Govinda, O Damodar, O Madhava. But even as the gopis cried out in this way, Akrura, having at sunrise performed his morning worship and other duties, began to drive the chariot. So they're basically now just losing it. All composure is lost, and they're running after Krishna, trying to stop him. Led by Nanda, the cowherd men followed behind Krishna in their wagons. The men brought along many offerings for the king, including clay pots filled with ghee and other milk products. With his glances, Krishna somewhat pacified the gopis, and they also followed behind for some time. Then, hoping he would give them some instruction, they stood still. As he parted, the gopis were lamenting, and thus he consoled them, saying, I will return. Sending their minds after Krishna, the gopis stood as motionless as figures in a painting. They remained there as long as the flag atop the chariot was visible, and even until they could no longer see the dust raised by the chariot wheels. The gopis then turned back in the hope that Krishna would ever return to, without hope that Krishna would ever return to them. Full of sorrow, they began to spend their days and nights chanting about his pastimes, the pastimes of their beloved. Now, Krishna, I think we'll take up the rest of it after next time. So let's see if there's any questions you'll have. If there's anyone who's got any questions still, I'd love to hear from you. Is there anyone with a question? You can write it down in Instagram or in Facebook or in YouTube, wherever you are. I'll be happy to answer your questions. Of course, if you're not able to think of anything right now, do feel free to write down in the comments on YouTube, and I'll be glad to answer there as well. Okay? And yeah, there's a whole playlist there now. This was the 101st video of that playlist. So we've got a lot for you to catch up on. There's the entire Bhagavad Gita, there's the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's all these ancient texts. that have been around thousands of years, bringing us the greatest wisdom from way before the Abrahamic religions, from 3000 BC. And these were texts that were put together by some of the wisest people on the planet. So I encourage you to check them out. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot. If you really care, if you're a seeker, if you really want to know, this is the place for you. Look for Spiritual Wisdom Academy on YouTube, or just my name, Rohit Juneja. I'll be there. All right, everyone, have a wonderful night, and I will see you next Tuesday. I'll be here at 7 p.m. Pacific time or 10 p.m. Eastern, and also, for about an hour, and I'll see you then. Take care. Good night.